Well, now with the assistance of the fellow members on Energetic Forum egging me on, I have them to thank for my feeling the need to revise my presumption of understanding to the point that I appreciate that the Earth Captor of Barbosa and Leal is a Tesla coil coupled to the Earth, and the reason why it works so effectively at drawing in extra net gain of watts is it does it through a leakage, a high frequency leakage of volts through the neon bulb. The neon bulb is, you could say it's an antenna, but it's a filter. It's a high frequency pass filter, leaving behind the low frequencies that the system needs to operate a load over here. Now, where does the high frequency come from? It comes from the magnetic coils themselves. They create a mixture of frequencies when they transfer power between the coils. So the sine wave inverter is, strictly speaking, producing 60 cycle beat, a 60 cycle beat frequency. It's kind of like a musical instrument. And that's all we want our load to be, and that's all we want our circuit to be. But these transformers are producing a mix of frequencies. That means some of the power that would have been strictly 60 cycles is now being taken away from the system by being placed at high frequencies, and those high frequencies can create a surge, and the surge is what we don't want, and this is what this is. It's a surge protector, and so what does it do? It gets rid of the high frequency voltage, but it leaves behind the high frequency amperage. Now, that imbalance requires the system to make up the difference, and so it gets extra volts from the Earth. And that's where we get our overunity from, is the extra volts coming from the Earth. Now, there's no current happening here. Strictly voltage. Strictly voltage between the neutral, plug number 1 neutral grounding rods, the 4 grounding rods, and the 56 or whatever it is, grounding rods that are connected to the Captor loop. Now, let's see if I get this straight. So the coils are producing noise, and the system gets rid of the noise through the top end of this, this outer loop is the top end of a Tesla coil. So the high frequencies are leaving the system. And in a sense, it's like a laser device because it's amplifying the lower frequencies. But it's silly to think that we have to create a problem, to create an imbalance. We have to create a mixture of frequencies, both high and the lower ones, particularly the 60 cycles that we need to keep, in order to create a parasitic transient, and then give it an escape. Because we're getting the energy from the Earth, and see, what we're losing out here is strictly voltage, because the air can't take anything else. We're not going to have lightning or arcing coming off this neon bulb. So it's strictly ions. It's charging the air, and it's getting rid of volts, but high frequency volts. So from the Earth, you're literally getting a draw of amperage. So the direction of this thing, linking it with the 4 grounding rods coming from the neutral of plug number 1, is erroneous. We should detach this over here and point it straight into the Earth, because it's going to be getting its because it's not really a true link. It's strictly getting volts from the Earth, so that wait a minute. You know what I'm beginning to think? that the transformer coils are creating high frequency volts. But maybe not high frequency amps, because magnetism is an amperage oriented situation. So maybe it retains its low frequency, all of its amperage has low frequency, it only produces high frequency volts, which means it's going to suck in. So this device up here is like a suction pump, whose effect will be made up for down here, to suck in more volts. And it's not frequency down here that matters. It's what's produced in here that matters. So if this produces a mixture of frequencies in the area of voltage, because we have to, this is AC, so we have to consider the two different aspects. So it keeps the amperage. It retains it. It is a keeper, but it's an amperage keeper. The continuous loop is an amperage keeper. Meanwhile, through this link here, it's going to get rid of, it's going to share all of the different frequencies that are in here with this outer leg here, and that's going to go out the system, the high frequency volts. So more voltage comes in here to make up the difference, and meanwhile we're accumulating amperage in here, which gets transferred to the Captor loop. So more volts is coming in through this loop, but more amperage is leaving it. Because it's not going to leave through here, because this is a single line connection here. It's going to leave it through the loop, because the loop has polarity, while this does not. And in order for amperage to flow, you have to have direction. With voltage equalization, there's really no direction. But with this one you do, and so you've got amperage coming out of here, but you've got volts. Oh, wait a minute. Oh no, it goes all the way around here. I forgot. Sorry. The volts comes in through the 56 or whatever grounding rods, goes through here and doesn't even go into the system yet. The amps are busy coming out of the Captor loop, but the volts have to go all the way around through the load and over to here, and then enter in. And anything high frequency will go out. That's assuming there is any frequency coming in from the Earth. The Earth may not have any frequency, because it may be a DC system. So it's the sine wave inverter that's creating the 60 cycles frequency, and it's the transformers that are converting some of that into high frequencies. So the voltage without frequency, the DC component, because AC is made up of both DC and AC, while DC is strictly DC alone. So the DC voltage of the Earth is being sucked in through this short here into the loop, into this continuous loop. And any high frequency volts can leave just as easily as the DC voltage without frequency comes in. So the high frequency volts, AC volts, leaves, the DC volts enters, and the AC amperage leaves through the Captor loop and goes to the load. Now it could come to here. Some of it's going to come to here actually to match, capacitively match what is being fed by the neutral. Anything in excess will go to the load. So the amperage is going to go in both directions, because it is a coil. It's going to want to go in both directions. But it's going to split based on need. And so the excess will go to the load, and have nowhere else to go, actually, now that I think of it. If the load is not there to use that amperage, it's going to have to go somewhere. Let's say the load drops its value. It may go back to the Earth, which is kind of weird. Why would it go back to the Earth? Oh, you know why? No. No, the Earth is regulated. This link here is regulated, and this is strictly a capacitive link here. So, you know, the amperage, if it's not needed by the load, is going to pile up as pressure. Why would that make sense? Oh, because the load converts it. Why? Oh no, if the load is shut down, it has to go back inside from where it came. Oh, so anything not needed. So any amperage that gets tied up here when it gets shut down has to go back inside. Provided we subtract first what is needed to counterpoise this, to create a voltage potential over here that equals the voltage potential over here in absolute terms, you know, absolute magnitude terms. Even though the sign value is going to be opposite, but the excess is going to go back into the continuous loop and get stored there. Meanwhile, the toroids are continuing to create a mixture of frequencies so that if there's an excess here that doesn't want to stay, it'll leave the system through here. So the system can balance itself at all times and make up the difference for changes in the load. Whatever change happens in the load, the system can accommodate it. And of course rapidly enough, because 60 cycles a second is fast enough. Now, pole transformers are all grounded. They're going to create noise just like these do. And they step down their voltage as they come to the consumer, which implies to me that in the course of stepping down, they're actually losing their energy back to the Earth from where they got it. And when the substations raise the voltage to send it over long distances, just in terms of long distance transmission, not, you know, giving it to any consumer, on the trunk of the grid rather than the branches, they have grounding rods too, grounding lines too, grounding plates, and they're going to make up the difference, drawing it up. So what they lose near the consumer will be gained back again in the middle portion, in the trunk section of the grid. So the whole grid balances itself out and makes up the difference. That's why those. You see, I always wondered, why do they have the pole transformers grounded if they're not using? They claim on Wikipedia that they, or you know, standard conventional wisdom, so to speak, consensus opinion, that single line transmission of power does not happen by and large because it would not work in the city. There would be too much conflict, just like this device does not work in the city because of the conflict involved. But out in the country, single line transmission saves on copper line, and they can get away with it, even though there's some resistance in the earth by comparison to the copper wire. So, if I take them to be honest, then what that means is they're using double line transmission of power in the city, which is most people. Most consumption is going to be in the city. Industry is going to be located in the city. And they're going to have all their power on the grid, not through the earth, and the only purpose of the earth will be to balance out the grid. And when they say it's for that purpose, they're being honest. It's to balance the grid. But it's to balance between different sections of the grid. Here, well, I'm not going to repeat myself because I said enough already. It's a clever system. It's a very clever system. The other thing worth mentioning is that this double direction arrow indicates that see, I had a hard time figuring out what these red dots mean. It has to do with direction of flow. In the inner circle, it's rotating clockwise or counterclockwise per half cycle. But in this outer framework, the outer circle that goes to plug number 2, the lead and the neutral, that one is moving up and down. So this outer red dot here matches this outer red dot here because on the next half cycle they'll both be at the bottom of the coil. While this one, it doesn't work that way. It goes one way and then it goes the other way, causing there to be an imbalance on the inside between the matching coils on either of these transformers. So here we've got a matching effect, while here we have a neutralization effect. The power on one coil is neutralizing the power on the other. And that's another aspect of what's going on that I still don't understand what effect it'll have overall, but it's probably going to be very significant. The problem, though, is of trying to analyze that is that it only applies to a two-toroid system, and according to the posts at Energetic Forum, two toroids are more efficient in that you don't have to have so many grounding rods to make up the difference. So there's something about the inner efficiency of having these two toroids set up the way they are that the direction's not going to be any different. Actually, now that I think of it, the only difference is that there won't be this toroid over here has a neutral polarity as opposed to this one. And I don't know what the significance of that is, having a neutral polarity. Because if it's that potent, whatever it is, if it's that potent to reduce the need for grounding rods, you would think we'd want to take it further, but how do you have more loops in the system? It's circular, so there's only 2. Unless you had a situation in which you had this continuous inner loop, and then you had another one at right angles to it in chain-like fashion, and then you made as many as you wanted, and each continuous loop would be independent of the other, the inner loop, while the outer is all linked together. That doesn't sound like a bad idea. I'll be darned. You know, that might just work. That might just work. You know why I say that? Because when they have a single transformer, they pass the inner loop wire through this interior of the transformer just once. Rather than wrapping it 2.5 times like it's normally done. I'm going to have to take off these excessive coil windings because this isn't properly... I'm going to have to do some more changes. This isn't properly drawn. It's supposed to be a step-down transformer. There's supposed to be less coils on the inside here and less coils on this inside face. Usually it's 2.5 turns of this 4-AUG wire. But when you have only one transformer and you lose this one, you only go around once. Or it's a half. Actually, it's a half turn because it doesn't even go around. It just goes through the whole of the transformer. And then the excess is coiled around the transformer rather than going through the interior. I bet it could be done. I bet it could help. But you know what it means? Is that the Captor loop on the first inner loop link chain of the chain link would have to be broken, so you only have the input on the first one and you only have the output on the second one. The output one would not go to earth ground, so it would be in series. But both inner loops would have to have this short here as well. You know, that might be a very interesting situation. That could be very interesting. Alright, I'll suggest it to the members on the forum then. I'll have to draft it and suggest it. I can see why I thought of that idea. Because it gives you the opportunity of having only 2 transformers per loop of this inner continuous loop of wire. And at the same time you get to increase it by pairs, or no, actually you get to increase it any amount you want. I mean, you could have a single transformer on the second loop, but you keep increasing the number of transformers, which means you're increasing the noise. You're converting your energy into high frequency voltage at a faster rate, because you're still sucking in the same amount of power from your inverter. You're converting more of it per unit of time into high frequency and bleeding that out through the voltage shunt and getting rid of it dissipated out through the neon bulb. So it would dissipate voltage more quickly and thus accumulate amperage more quickly as well to accommodate bigger loads. Or accommodate loads that vary too much. I don't know if that's a problem, if loads should increase or decrease very suddenly. Because acceleration is a form of load, that's right. Extreme change in load, particularly if it has to go upwards, is much more than when it cruises. When a load cruises at its operating level. So, actually, now that I think of it, it should work in both instances, because both are equivalent. Either running more appliances continuously is equivalent to a single appliance creating a huge drain, a huge drag on the system when it tries to kick into gear and reach its cruising speed, so to speak. And rather than trying to make up the difference with grounding rods, it should be with more continuous loops, more transformers linked together in a chain-link fashion. That sounds like the deal.